Shaquille O'Neal cries when he sees child share lunch with classmate who has no money. Are you ready to witness a moment that will restore your faith in humanity? Today, you're going to discover an incredible story about how a simple act of kindness from an 8-year-old boy moved one of the biggest men in sports to tears and changed lives forever. This is a story about compassion, generosity, and how the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact. If this story touches your heart the way it should, please hit that like button right now, subscribe to our channel, and turn on those notifications because stories like this remind us what really matters in life. Now, let's dive into this beautiful moment that proves heroes come in all sizes. The morning fog was just lifting from the streets of Oakland, California, as Shaquille O'Neal's black SUV pulled up to Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School. At 7:45 a.m., the parking lot was already bustling with parents dropping off their children, yellow school buses rumbling to a stop, and the familiar chaos of another school day beginning. Shaq wasn't supposed to be here. His original plan had been to visit the school next week as part of his foundation's literacy program. But a last-minute schedule change had opened up his morning. His assistant, knowing how much these school visits meant to him, had called Principal Rodriguez the night before. "Mr. O'Neal, we are so honored to have you here," Principal Maria Rodriguez said as she approached the SUV. Even after 20 years in education, she still felt a thrill when celebrities took time to visit their underfunded inner-city school. "The kids are going to lose their minds when they see you." Shaq emerged from the vehicle, his 7'1" frame immediately drawing stares from passing parents and students. He wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, wanting to keep the visit as low-key as possible. In his hands, he carried 2 large bags, filled with books. Picture books for the younger kids, chapter books for the older ones. "Thank you for having me, Principal Rodriguez. I know it's short notice." His voice carried that familiar warmth that had made him a beloved figure long after his basketball career ended. "I was hoping we could keep this quiet, you know? No big assembly or anything. I just want to spend time with the kids, maybe read some stories." "Of course," she nodded, though she could barely contain her excitement. "We have about 400 students here, grades K through 5. About 85% qualify for free or reduced lunch, so having someone like you show up, it means everything to these kids." As they walked toward the main entrance, Shaq noticed the condition of the building. Paint peeling from the walls, playground equipment that had seen better days, windows that needed replacing. It reminded him of his own elementary school experiences, bouncing from base to base with his military stepfather, often attending schools that struggled with funding and resources. "How long have you been principal here?" Shaq asked as they entered the building. 15 years, Principal Rodriguez replied with obvious pride. "It's not easy, but these kids, they're incredible. They just need people to believe in them, to show them that education can change their lives." The hallways were lined with colorful student artwork and motivational posters. Despite the building's age, there was clearly love and care put into making it a welcoming environment. Teachers smiled and waved as they passed, some whispering excitedly to colleagues about their surprise visitor. "Where would you like to start?" Principal Rodriguez asked. "Wherever you think I can do the most good," Shaq replied. "Maybe with the youngest kids? I've always had a soft spot for the little ones." They headed toward the kindergarten wing, but as they passed the cafeteria, Shaq paused. Through the open doors, he could see children beginning to gather for breakfast, a free meal program that many of the students depended on to start their day. "Mind if we stop in here for a minute?" Shaq asked. "I'd like to see how the breakfast program works." Principal Rodriguez hesitated slightly. The cafeteria during breakfast time could be chaotic, and she wasn't sure how the lunch staff would handle having Shaquille O'Neal suddenly appear in their kitchen. But something in his expression told her this was important to him. "Of course," she said. "Mrs. Patterson runs our food service program. She's been here almost as long as I have." They entered the cafeteria, where about 50 children sat at long tables, eating breakfast and chattering excitedly before classes began. The noise level immediately dropped as the kids noticed the giant man who had just walked in. Within seconds, whispers of, "Is that Shaq?" and "Oh my God, it's really him," rippled through the room. Shaq waved at the children, many of whom were now standing on their chairs to get a better look. But his attention was drawn to something else entirely. A small boy sitting alone at a corner table, staring at an empty tray in front of him. If you're already feeling the emotion building in this story, please take a second to hit that like button. What happens next will touch your heart in ways you never expected. The child couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with dark hair that looked like it had been cut at home and clothes that, while clean, had clearly seen many wash cycles. His name tag read Marcus, and he sat perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap, watching other children eat their breakfast, while his own tray remained empty. Shaq's heart immediately went out to the boy. He'd been that kid once, the one who didn't quite fit in, who sometimes went without, who learned early that life wasn't always fair. Without thinking, he began walking toward Marcus's table. "Hey there, buddy," Shaq said softly, crouching down to get closer to the boy's eye level. Though even crouching, he still towered over the small child. "I'm Shaq. What's your name?" Marcus looked up with wide brown eyes, clearly overwhelmed by the massive presence beside him. "I'm Marcus," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "That's a strong name, Marcus. Are you not hungry this morning?" The boy's eyes darted around the cafeteria before settling back on Shaq. I forgot my lunch money again," he said quietly. "Mama gave it to me, but I think I lost it on the bus." Principal Rodriguez, who had been watching from a distance, quickly approached. She knelt beside them, her voice gentle but concerned. "Marcus, you know we have the free breakfast program. You don't need money for breakfast, sweetheart." Marcus shook his head, his cheeks turning red with embarrassment. "My form got lost. Mama filled it out, but the office said they can't find it, and she has to fill out a new one. She's working 2 jobs, and she keeps forgetting to come in." The bye-to explanation trailed off, and Shaq could see the shame in the child's eyes. This wasn't about paperwork or bureaucracy. This was about a little boy who was hungry and didn't know how to ask for help. "Well," Shaq said, standing up to his full height, "I think I can solve this problem pretty easily. Mrs. He looked toward the lunch lady behind the serving counter. "Patterson," the woman replied, clearly starstruck but trying to maintain her composure. "Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Patterson, could you please get my friend Marcus here a breakfast? Whatever he wants. It's on me." "Oh, Mr. O'Neal, you don't need to." "I insist," Shaq said with a smile. "In fact, any kid in here who needs breakfast, lunch, or anything else, you just let me know. Today's my treat." The cafeteria erupted in cheers, but Shaq's attention remained focused on Marcus, who was now looking up at him with an expression of pure gratitude and amazement. As Mrs. Patterson hurried to prepare a breakfast tray for Marcus, Shaq noticed another child approaching their table. A girl, maybe 9 years old, with pigtails and a bright yellow dress. Her name tag read Sophia, and she was carrying a brown paper bag, clearly a lunch packed from home. "Hi, Marcus," Sophia said, sitting down across from him without invitation. "I brought extra today." She began unpacking her lunch, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, an apple, a small bag of chips, and a juice box. Without hesitation, she tore the sandwich in half and placed one piece on Marcus's empty tray. "Sophia, you don't have to—" Marcus started, but she was already dividing the chips into two piles. "My mom always packs too much anyway," she said matter-of-factly. "Besides, food tastes better when you share it." Shaq felt something catch in his throat as he watched this simple exchange. Here was Mrs. Patterson approaching with a full breakfast tray for Marcus, and yet this little girl had already solved the problem in the most beautiful way possible, through pure, uncomplicated kindness. Principal Rodriguez touched Shaq's arm gently. "That's Sophia Martinez," she whispered. "She does this almost every day. Finds kids who forgot their lunch or don't have enough, and she shares hers. Her mother packs extra because she knows Sophia will give it away." Shaq watched as more children began joining Marcus and Sophia's table, each contributing something small: a piece of fruit, half a sandwich, some crackers. Within minutes, what had started as one child's empty tray had become a communal feast, with kids laughing and talking as they shared their morning meal. "How often does this happen?" Shaq asked Principal Rodriguez, his voice thick with emotion. "More often than you'd think," she replied sadly. "We do our best with the free meal programs, but there are always gaps. Paperwork gets lost, families move frequently, and records don't transfer quickly enough. Parents working multiple jobs can't always come in to fill out forms. The kids, they just take care of each other." Shaq stood there, watching these children demonstrate a level of compassion and community that he rarely saw in the adult world. His own breakfast suddenly seemed unimportant. All he could think about was the natural kindness these kids showed each other, despite having so little themselves. As the breakfast period continued, Shaq found himself completely absorbed in watching the children. He'd initially come to the school to read books and inspire kids about education, but instead, he was the one being educated. The lesson was simple, yet profound. Kindness doesn't require wealth, status, or even abundance. It just requires a willing heart. "Mr. Shaq," Sophia called out, having noticed him standing nearby. "Do you want to sit with us?" The other children at the table immediately scooted over, making room for the enormous man. Shaq carefully lowered himself onto the small bench, his knees nearly touching his chin, drawing giggles from the kids. "This is much better," he said with a grin. "Now I can talk to you all properly. Sophia, that was really nice what you did for Marcus." Sophia shrugged, as if sharing her lunch was the most natural thing in the world. "My abuela always says that when you have something good, you're supposed to share it. Food is good, so you share it." "Your grandmother sounds very wise," Shaquille replied. "What else does she tell you?" "She says, God gives us things not just for us, but so we can help other people too," the little girl said, taking a bite of her apple. "Like, maybe God knew Marcus might forget his lunch money today, so he made sure my mom packed extra." Marcus, who had been quietly eating the breakfast Mrs. Patterson had brought him, looked up. "My mama says the same thing. She says when people help us, it's like God using their hands to take care of us." Shaq felt his eyes beginning to water. These children, who had so little in terms of material possessions, possessed a richness of spirit that put most adults to shame. They understood concepts of community, reciprocity, and divine providence in ways that were both simple and profound. "Can I tell you guys something?" Shaq said, his voice softer now. "I've traveled all over the world, met presidents and movie stars and famous people, but sitting here with you all, watching how you take care of each other, this is the most important thing I've seen in a long time." A boy named David, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "My dad says you were really good at basketball." "I was okay," Shaq replied with a modest smile. "But you know what? Being good at basketball is nothing compared to being good to people. What Sophia did today, what all of you do when you help each other, that's more important than any game I ever played." "Did you ever forget your lunch when you were little?" asked a girl named Amy. Shaq nodded. "More times than I can count. My family moved around a lot because my stepdad was in the army. I was always the new kid, always trying to figure out how things worked at each new school. And yeah, sometimes I forgot my lunch money, or we didn't have much money that week." "What did you do?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "Sometimes I went hungry," Shaq admitted. "Sometimes a nice lunch lady would give me something anyway. And sometimes kids like you would share with me. Those are the people I remember most. Not the famous people I met later, but the kids who shared their cookies with me when I was scared and hungry and feeling alone." The children listened intently, hanging on every word. It was clear that they'd never imagined that someone as successful and famous as Shaquille O'Neal had ever experienced the same struggles they faced every day. "The thing is," Shaq continued, "those experiences taught me something really important. They taught me that when you grow up and you're blessed with success, you never forget what it felt like to need help. And you never forget the people who helped you when you needed it most." Principal Rodriguez, who had been observing from across the cafeteria, found herself wiping tears from her eyes. She'd arranged for Shaq to visit so he could inspire the children, but it was clear that the inspiration was flowing in both directions. "Mr. Shaq," Sophia said suddenly, "are you going to cry?" Shaq laughed, not bothering to wipe the tears that were indeed forming in his eyes. "Maybe a little bit, sweetheart. Sometimes when you see something really beautiful, it makes you cry. Not sad crying, but happy crying." "What's beautiful?" Marcus asked, looking around the cafeteria. "You are," Shaq said simply. "All of you. The way you look out for each other, the way you share what you have, the way you make sure nobody sits alone. That's the most beautiful thing in the world." The bell rang, signaling the end of breakfast time. Children began clearing their trays and heading toward their classrooms. But before they left, something magical happened. One by one, the kids at Shaq's table came over to hug him, or at least hug as much of him as their small arms could reach. "Thank you for eating breakfast with us," Sophia said, giving him a tight squeeze around his waist. "Thank you for teaching me something important," Shaq replied, patting her gently on the head. As the children filed out of the cafeteria, chattering excitedly about their famous breakfast companion, Shaq remained seated at the small table, overwhelmed by emotion. In 20 minutes, these kids had reminded him of everything that truly mattered in life. Principal Rodriguez approached Shaq's table as the cafeteria emptied, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of him and sat down across from him, her own eyes still moist from watching the interaction between the NBA legend and her students. "I have to ask," she said gently, "are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Shaq accepted the coffee gratefully, using the moment to compose himself. "I'm more than okay," he said finally. "I'm humbled. Those kids just gave me a masterclass in what really matters." "They do that," Principal Rodriguez said with a knowing smile. "I've been working in education for over 20 years, and I learned something new from these children. Every single day. They don't see obstacles the way adults do. They just see problems and figure out how to solve them." "That little girl, Sophia," Shaq said, shaking his head in amazement. She didn't hesitate for even a second. She saw Marcus needed food, and she just shared hers. No big speech, no making him feel bad about it, just kindness. Her mother is remarkable too, Principal Rodriguez added. Single mom, works as a housekeeper at 3 different hotels. She could easily pack just enough lunch for Sophia and save money. But she knows her daughter has a generous heart, so she always packs extra. She's essentially feeding other people's children every day and doesn't think twice about it. Shaq was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup. You know, I spend millions of dollars every year on charity. I have foundations, I do fundraisers, I write checks to help kids. And somehow, watching a 9-year-old share half her sandwich did more to restore my faith in humanity than any big donation I've ever made. It's not about the size of the gift, Principal Rodriguez observed. It's about the size of the sacrifice. For Sophia, giving away half her lunch means she might still be hungry later, but she does it anyway. That's real generosity. Exactly, Shaq said, his voice growing stronger with conviction. These kids are sharing from their need, not from their abundance. That's biblical. That's what real love looks like. Principal Rodriguez nodded. We have about 60 kids in this school who regularly share their lunches with classmates who don't have enough. 60 kids who've figured out that community means taking care of each other. They don't wait for adults to solve the problem. They just solve it themselves. Shaq stood up from the tiny bench, his massive frame unfolding to its full height. I need to do something about this, not just here, but everywhere. There are kids all over the country sitting at lunch tables with empty trays, feeling ashamed because they don't have what other kids have. What are you thinking? Principal Rodriguez asked, recognizing the determined look in his eyes. I'm thinking that if a 9-year-old can feed hungry kids with half a peanut butter sandwich, imagine what we could do if we really put our minds to it. Shaq began pacing the empty cafeteria, his mind racing with possibilities. What if we could eliminate lunch debt in schools? What if no kid ever had to sit at a table with an empty tray again? That would be incredible, Principal Rodriguez said, though her tone suggested she understood the enormity of such an undertaking. Do you know how much lunch debt exists in American schools? Shaq pulled out his phone and made a quick call to his assistant. Sarah, I need you to research something for me. How much student lunch debt is there in American public schools? I want numbers. I want to know which districts are hit hardest, and I want to know what it would cost to eliminate it entirely. He hung up and turned back to Principal Rodriguez. I've been successful in business, in entertainment, in a lot of different areas. But today, sitting with those kids, I realized I've been thinking too small. I've been treating symptoms instead of solving problems. What do you mean? I mean, I'll donate money to buy books for a library, but there are still kids in that same school going hungry during lunch. I'll pay for new computers for a computer lab, but there are still children sitting alone because they're embarrassed. About not having lunch money? Shaq's voice was growing more passionate. Those kids showed me that the most important gift you can give someone isn't something expensive. It's dignity. It's making sure they know they belong, that they're not alone. Mrs. Patterson, the lunch supervisor who had been quietly cleaning up the kitchen, approached them hesitantly. Mr. O'Neill, I hope you don't mind me interrupting. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did for Marcus today, and for offering to help the other kids too. Mrs. Patterson, can I ask you something? Shaq said. How many kids come through your line every day who don't have money for lunch? The older woman's face grew sad. More than you'd think. We do our best with the free and reduced lunch programs, but there are always kids who fall through the cracks. Maybe their parents make just a little too much money to qualify, but not enough to comfortably afford school lunches. Maybe the paperwork gets lost or delayed. Maybe they're in foster care, and the placement is too new for the paperwork to be processed. What happens to those kids? Well, officially, we're supposed to give them a basic meal, a cheese sandwich and milk. But, she lowered her voice, sometimes I just give them the regular lunch anyway. I can't stand to see a child go hungry. I know I'm not supposed to, but I'd rather get in trouble than watch a kid suffer. Shaq felt his respect for this woman grow immensely. Here was another adult who understood what those children had demonstrated so beautifully, that taking care of each other is more important than following rules. Mrs. Patterson, he said solemnly, you're never going to get in trouble for feeding hungry kids. Not on my watch. 2 hours later, Shaq sat in Principal Rodriguez's office, his phone buzzing constantly with calls from his assistant, his business manager, and various members of his team. The research he'd requested was already coming in, and the numbers were staggering. Sarah just sent me the preliminary data, Shaq said, scrolling through his phone. There's over $262 million in student lunch debt in American public schools. $262 million. That's kids who want to eat but can't afford to, kids who are being denied food, kids sitting at tables feeling ashamed because their families are struggling. Principal T.D. Rodriguez whistled softly. That's an enormous problem, Shaq. Even for someone with your resources, that's exactly the kind of problem that needs solving, Shaq interrupted. You know what I spend $262 million on in a typical year? Investments, business ventures, things that make me more money. But what if instead of making more money, I used money to make sure kids don't go hungry at school? His phone rang, and he glanced at the caller ID. This is my financial advisor. I need to take this. He answered the call, putting it on speaker so Principal Rodriguez could hear. Shaq, I got your message about researching student lunch debt. I have to tell you, this is a massive undertaking you're considering. The logistics alone. Marcus, I'm sitting in an elementary school where I just watched a 9-year-old girl share her lunch with a boy who couldn't afford his own. I watched 60 other kids do the same thing, day after day, because they understand something we adults seem to have forgotten, that we're supposed to take care of each other. So yeah, it's massive, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. There was a pause on the other end. Okay, let's talk numbers. If you wanted to eliminate student lunch debt in, say, California alone, you're looking at about $50 million. Done, Shaq said without hesitation. Done? Shaq, we haven't even discussed. We'll discuss details later. Right now, I want you to start identifying the school districts with the highest lunch debt in California. Start with the ones that serve the most low-income families. I want to eliminate their debt completely. Principal Rodriguez stared at him in amazement. Shaq, are you serious? You're talking about paying off student lunch debt for entire school districts? I'm talking about making sure kids like Marcus and Sophia never have to worry about whether they'll have enough to eat at school. I'm talking about making sure no child ever sits at a lunch table with an empty tray again. Shaq's voice was firm with conviction. These kids taught me something today that I should have learned a long time ago. They taught me that sharing isn't about having extra to give away. It's about making sure everyone has what they need, even if it means you have less. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. The Today Show wants to interview you about this, he read aloud. CNN is asking for a statement. Word is already getting out. Good, Shaq said, surprising Principal Rodriguez with his response. I want it to get out. I want other people to see what I saw today. I want them to understand that there are kids in schools all across America who are hungry, who are ashamed, who are sitting alone because they can't afford something as basic as lunch. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the playground where children were now running and playing during recess. But more than that, I want people to see what these kids taught me about kindness. I want them to know that the solution isn't complicated. It's just about caring enough to act. Principal Rodriguez joined him at the window. You know, when I called you yesterday to arrange this visit, I thought you'd come in, read some stories, take some pictures, and leave. I never imagined. Neither did I, Shaq admitted. I came here to give these kids something, but they gave me so much more. They reminded me why I work so hard, why I've been blessed with success. It's not so I can have more stuff. It's so I can make sure other people, especially kids, have what they need. A knock on the office door interrupted them. Mrs. Patterson peeked in, looking excited. Mr. O'Neill, I hope I'm not interrupting, but Sophia and Marcus are here. They wanted to give you something before you leave. Of course, send them in. The two children entered the office, Sophia carrying a piece of paper, and Marcus holding what appeared to be a small handmade card. They approached Shaq with the same easy confidence they'd shown in the cafeteria. We made you these, Sophia said, handing him the paper. It was a drawing of the cafeteria table with stick figures representing all the children who had shared breakfast together. At the top, in careful second-grade handwriting, it said, "Thank you for eating with us. Love, your friends." Marcus handed him the card, which was made from construction paper and decorated with stickers. Inside, in shaky pencil letters, he had written, "Dear Mr. Shaq, thank you for making sure I had breakfast. My mom says when people help us, we should always say thank you and remember to help other people too. I will remember. Your friend, Marcus." Shaq knelt down to their level, holding the precious gifts they'd made him. "These are the most beautiful presents anyone has ever given me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Can I tell you guys something?" Both children nodded eagerly. "You two, and all your friends here at school, you taught me something very important today. You taught me that the best way to show love is to share what you have, even when you don't have very much. You taught me that kindness doesn't cost money, but it's worth more than all the money in the world. Are you still going to cry?" Sophia asked with the innocent directness of a child. Shaq laughed, not even trying to hide his tears now. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think I am. But remember what I told you before. Sometimes we cry when we see something beautiful. And what you kids do for each other every day, the way you take care of each other, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." He pulled both children into a gentle hug, careful not to overwhelm them with his size. "I want you to promise me something, okay? Promise me you'll keep being kind to each other. Keep sharing. Keep looking out for kids who need help. Keep being the amazing people you already are." "We promise," they said in unison. As the children left to return to their classrooms, Shaq carefully folded their drawings and placed them in his jacket pocket. These simple pieces of paper, made by children who had so little but gave so much, would become among his most treasured possessions. "So what happens now?" Principal Rodriguez asked. Shaq pulled out his phone and began typing a message to his entire team. "Now we change everything. We start with California schools, but we don't stop there. We figure out how to eliminate student lunch debt across the entire country. We make sure no child ever sits at a lunch table feeling ashamed because their family is struggling." He looked up from his phone, his eyes bright with purpose. "But more than that, we tell this story. We tell people about Sophia and Marcus and all the other kids who show us every day what real love looks like. We remind the world that the smallest acts of kindness can have the biggest impact." 3 months later, Shaquille O'Neal's foundation announced the elimination of student lunch debt in 47 California school districts, affecting over 180,000 students. The initiative, which he called the Sophia Project, in honor of the little girl who had shared her sandwich, sparked a nationwide movement that eventually eliminated student lunch debt in over 500 school districts across America. But for Shaq, the real victory wasn't in the numbers or the media coverage. It was in knowing that somewhere, in schools across the country, children were sitting down to lunch without shame, without hunger, and without fear. And it all started with a 9-year-old girl who understood that when you have something good, you share it. This incredible story shows us that inspiration can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the smallest people teach us the biggest lessons. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this one, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of kindness. Remember, you don't have to be big to make a big difference. You just have to have a big heart. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful journey. And remember to look for the Sophias and Marcuses in your own life. The quiet heroes who make the world better simply by caring.